This is the Samsung S95F, which is the most elite OLED TV in Samsung's 2025 range, delivering a premium set of features with the performance to match. The next-gen QD-OLED panel pushes both brightness levels and color depth for this kind of TV to new highs. The Samsung S95F comes in sizes from 55 inches up to 83 inches, though it's worth noting that the 83-inch model doesn't use Samsung's QD-OLED panel, but instead uses LG's tandem RGB panel as used in the LG G5. I will talk about that in the picture quality section, don't you worry. The 55-inch model officially costs $2,499 or pounds, the 65-inch version costs $3,399 or pounds, the 77-inch version costs $4,499 or £4,299, and the 83-inch version is priced at $6,499 or £6,799. However, you should expect these prices to start dropping pretty quickly. LG and Sony are getting aggressive with the prices of their own flagship OLEDs, and Samsung is never one to be outdone. The S95F is a fantastic OLED TV that delivers exceptional picture quality while also eliminating mirror-like reflections in bright rooms using its OLED Glare-free 2.0 screen, while not suffering as severe black crush as its predecessor, the S95D. The S95F is also excellent for gaming, looks physically stunning, and delivers solid sound. Its black levels are still a little flawed compared to the LG G5 when watched with strong ambient lighting, which partially steers our final verdict on it, as I'll come to. But that is a fair trade-off for how well it removes reflections in really bright rooms. The S95F is an outstanding TV, so let's get into where it excels and where you might want to choose another option. Starting with our measurements of the 55-inch QD-OLED S95F's performance using out-of-the-box settings, the TV hit 2,132 nits of HDR peak brightness, measured on a 10% HDR white window pattern in filmmaker mode. When we measured a pre-release version of the 83-inch model, which has a different type of OLED screen, which is the same as the LG G5's, we measured 2,388 nits of peak HDR brightness in filmmaker mode on that model, which is a good 10% step up over this smaller option. But that was a pre-release 83-inch model and wasn't tested in our lab conditions here, just to be clear. The LG G5, for comparison, measured 2,268 nits in HDR peak brightness filmmaker mode, so sits closer to the 83-inch version of the S95F than this QD-OLED one, which makes sense, since the G5 and the 83-inch use the same screen. The 55-inch S95F achieved 2,135 nits of peak HDR brightness in standard mode, while the 83-inch version hit 2,102 nits in the same test. The LG G5, for comparison, hit 1,850 nits in standard mode, so the S95F has a clear edge over its rival in that kind of mode. We also measured the 55-inch S95F's movie mode brightness because we found that this mode was preferable to filmmaker mode for some movies in brighter conditions, and the movie mode hit 2,109 nits of peak HDR brightness in a 10% window. As for HDR full screen brightness, measured on a 100% white HDR window pattern, which is important for sports, daytime and bright room viewing, the 55-inch S95F clocked 390 nits in filmmaker mode, making it the brightest 55-inch OLED TV we've tested in this sense. It beat the previous champion, the LG G5, which clocked 331 nits in filmmaker mode. However, the 83-inch version of the S95F we tested crushed its smaller sibling here and achieved 465 nits of full screen brightness in filmmaker mode. This is a level you expect from mini LED TVs, not OLED. With SDR full screen brightness, however, the LG G5 still holds the crown because that hit 327 nits in filmmaker mode, whereas the S95F here clocked in at 181 nits. It's a good thing it has that anti-reflective coating for daytime viewers, given that it's so much less bright than the G5 in SDR. The S95F's most unusual feature is that OLED Glare-free 2.0 screen, which does a mind-blowing job of eliminating mirror-like reflections, even with bright overhead lights on in our testing room. The issue with mirrored reflections in TVs is that they're actually on a different focal plane to the TV's image. So when your eye catches them, you have to focus away from the rest of the screen. That's why they're so annoying and are quite fatiguing to live with when you're trying to watch something. On the S95F, these reflections are reduced to just a haze at most, so they don't steal your eye's focus. We found when testing the Samsung S95D, the predecessor to this TV, that the matte screen caused black crush, particularly in filmmaker mode, which meant you lost detail in dark areas. These are the areas OLED is supposed to excel in. And thankfully, the S95F has improved on this. There were still some instances of black crush in dark scene in movies such as The Batman and Nosferatu, but they were minimal in comparison. We did find when watching dark movies in bright rooms that setting dynamic tone mapping from the default static to the active mode when in filmmaker mode gave it a solid brightness boost without sacrificing black levels or contrast too much, and helped to reduce that black crush issue. Where the S95F's picture really shines is its colours. Watching a 4K stream of Elemental on Disney+, fire characters, as well as embers, glass and vase making, delivered stunning glistening reds and oranges with a real vivid punch in bright highlight areas of the screen. A 4K Blu-ray of Wicked also demonstrated natural but vibrant colours, particularly in the Wizard and I scene where Elphaba stands among pink flowers. We preferred filmmaker mode's accuracy, but those looking for a brighter dose of colour can select movie mode for something that's really bold but still realistic. It's no surprise that the 55-inch S95F delivers such spectacular HDR colours, because when we measured its HDR colour gamut coverage, it yielded results of 100% of the Cinema DCI P3 gamut and 89.3% of the BT 2020 gamut. This is the first time we've measured 100% for HDR colour on a TV, although I should note that the LG G5 scored 99.6%, so there's not exactly a huge difference. Oddly, we measured the 83-inch S95F at 94.9% of the P3 colour gamut, so that is surprisingly low compared to both those TVs, but like I said, it was a pre-release version. Black levels and contrast are still excellent on the S95F overall, particularly when viewed in dimmed or pitch black conditions. Watching The Batman, the subway fight and crime scene sequences showed deep black levels, with brilliant contrast between dark areas and light areas from light sources such as lamps, torches and flashbulbs. Shadow detail was great as well, with objects on walls still visible in dark conditions. Speaking of textures, the S95F showed a near 3D-like quality for every 4K movie we used. Clearly, the real depth enhancer was hard at work, as every facial feature, skin tone and object looked accurate, lifelike and refined. We found the S95F's upscaling was effective when viewing an HD stream of Fight Club. While not as successful with lower resolution TV shows, textures were still upscaled with improved quality. Motion for the S95F is good, although we did find that blur and judder reduction needed to be set at level 5 each. A panning shot of the cliffside in No Time to Die was smooth without the dreaded soap opera effect when we used those settings. For sports, we opted for standard picture mode with those judder and blur settings that I mentioned, and we found the action to be smooth without any hint of ghosting of the ball during a football game. Putting the S95F side by side with the LG G5, the S95F is better for bright room viewing, especially extremely bright rooms. But we couldn't help but admire the richer, inkier, uncompromised black levels of the G5. The matte screen does bring a compromise of raising the black tones to being slightly more grey in comparison, but tweaking the settings I mentioned helps narrow the gap, and in dim conditions, the S95F looks even better. It is a trade-off between the distraction-free reflection busting that this offers, or the deeper blacks with more reflections that the G5 offers. Against the Sony Bravia 8 II, which also uses a QD OLED panel, the Samsung is clearly brighter in highlights, but the Sony has more refined textures and an incredibly appealing and natural image. It has a glossy screen rather than the matte screen used here, so it also keeps the inky black tones while handling reflections very well for a glossy screen. The S95F comes equipped with a built-in 4.2.2 channel speaker array with 70 watts of total power. It includes AI sound mode options and supports Dolby Atmos soundtracks. There is no support for DTS soundtracks, however. There are two preset sound modes to choose from, Standard and Amplify. With the S95F set to the Amplify sound mode, the Batmobile Penguin chase scene in The Batman produced hefty, impactful bass and rumble from the Batmobile's engine and the explosions. The speakers were effective at mapping effects such as screeching tires and gunfire to match the on-screen action, feeling tightly connected to the motion. Throughout Wicked, the S95F speakers also delivered clear vocals and dialogue, as well as a very good balance between the vocals and the uplifting and powerful score, which was itself delivered with clarity and precision. While its built-in sound is very good, we couldn't help but find the soundstage narrow in places and that its volume needed to be pushed to get the full experience. However, that produced some buzz from the bass. Separate speakers are still recommended, or the Sony Bravia 8 II has better built-in sound if you don't want to add another box to your setup. The S95F is a sight to behold. Razor thin with a bezel-less screen, the S95F is incredibly sleek and has an appealing and modern look. It comes with a weighty black metal stand, and while assembly requires 2 people, once attached, it gives the TV a floating look and feels solid and sturdy. The S95F comes with the brand's One Connect box, which houses the S95F's many connections, including the 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, 3 USB ports, an optical port, tuner ports for broadcast TV, and an Ethernet port. This box is then connected to the S95F via a single cable, and the box itself can be housed on the back of the TV stand if you prefer. It's ideal for those looking to wall mount their TV with minimal cables, because all power and video is delivered over one cable. For remotes, the S95F comes with the solar cell remote, a smaller remote with volume control, app shortcuts, and the new AI button for AI assistant shortcuts. The remote can be charged via USB-C or through the solar panel on the back of the remote. UK users will also find an older style remote with numbered buttons in the box, as well as the solar cell remote. The S95F uses Samsung's own Tizen smart TV platform, with this year's version called Tizen 9.0. It has access to all the major streaming apps, but UK users should note that it does not include Freeview Play for broadcast TV, instead using Samsung's own Samsung TV Plus. UK-based streaming apps are still available on it, however. Tizen 9.0's homepage is split into 3 sections. For You, which houses AI-tailored content recommendations, which are mostly accurate and effective based on our experience. The Live section for live TV, and the App section for a fuller apps list. For You is the default, and while there is a large banner ad at the top of the screen, a neat customizable row of apps sits at the bottom of the screen and is easily accessible. Aside from the homepage, there are 3 other main hubs to talk about. Game for gaming-based applications, Ambient for an ambient mode in place of standby, and Daily Plus for lifestyle and workplace-based apps. Menu and settings navigation is made easier thanks to a quick menu, which we didn't find as effective as LG's version of this, but is still a very welcome addition. Accessing the right menus and settings can be long-winded, and navigation can stutter on occasion, but it was mostly a smooth experience. As well as the usual picture and sound settings, of which there are a good amount for picture customization, there are a number of AI-based tools, including AI picture and sound modes. There is an AI assistant as well. A press of the remote's AI button when in a TV show on Samsung TV Plus gives you a summary of the show, and it recommends similar shows. The S95F is an extremely well-featured TV for gaming. All 4 HDMI ports support 4K at up to 165Hz, variable refresh rate with AMD FreeSync Premium Pro, and, for the first time on Samsung, NVIDIA G-Sync following an update. Samsung's Game Hub continues to be an excellent portal for everything gaming related, including a healthy choice of cloud-based gaming apps from the likes of Xbox, NVIDIA GeForce Now, and Luna. As with all Samsung's TVs, the S95F is no slouch with gaming performance either. An ultra-low 9.5 milliseconds input lag time delivers a smooth experience with no hint of screen tear or stutter in performance whatsoever. The S95F also delivers superb picture quality for gaming, with a truly bright, vibrant and dynamic look filled with colour and detail. The Real Depth Enhancer Pro feature gave the picture a hyper-realistic look with fantastic detail in every object on screen. Value is a slightly tough area to judge for the Samsung S95F, as it carries pretty much all the features you'd ever need while also delivering high quality performance. But this all comes at a premium price. At the time of recording, the LG G5 is slightly the cheaper of the two TVs, but odds are that these two will constantly trade which one is cheaper over the next year, so expect that to change. But if the LG G5 is cheaper, we would lean towards getting that. But the S95F earns its high price overall. It has record-breaking picture results in a couple of areas, and the matte screen is uniquely useful in some viewing conditions, although not everyone likes it, let's be clear. The One Connect box is a really nice option to have and may sway people who will wall mount the TV. And for gamers, this is basically as well featured as TVs get, thanks to the addition of NVIDIA G-Sync in these 2025 OLED models. With everything balanced, we'd say that the S95F is a 5-star TV, just like the LG G5 is. But our TV reviews team here leans slightly towards the LG G5 as the preferred option of the two. But the difference is very slim, and for reflection-prone rooms, the S95F is uniquely great among OLED TVs. If you have any questions about the S95F or about the other TVs available today that we've reviewed, or you want to let us know what other TVs you want to see reviewed, please let us know in the comments.